Okay. All right. All right. So, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mental Health Without Borders, the podcast where we bridge conversations across cultures, continents, and communities. I'm your host, Martha Esse, a psych MP and the founder of Mental Health Without Borders. And I'm joined today by my beautiful co host here, Antoinette, popularly known as Auntie. Auntie is also a transformational life coach. And Auntie, thank you so much for your continuous dedication to this podcast and your continuous support to our community. We need more people like you.
Thank you, my love.
So, last month was Mental Health Awareness Month, and we hosted a girls' hangout pillow talk, which was such a great success. And I can't wait until the next event. I know the girls have been asking when we're going to have the next one, so we just have to communicate a date and time for that. So this month is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. For those of you who don't know, and the timing is just right. So today we are going to be diving into the critical conversation, the one that often goes unheard. That is the mental health in our African community, especially our African men. Um, we will explore some questions, surrounding mental health when it comes to our African men, why they suffer in silence, why is it such a taboo to talk about mental health or even seek therapy? you know um are there any cultural, religious, or traumatic experiences that's affecting African men's mental health? And how can we even start to break the generational chains of stigma surrounding mental health? So, Auntie, I'll like to just throw some questions at you so we can talk about some of these subjects to see how we can help to break this silence that's in our community. In your experience, why do you think mental health remains a taboo topic for many African men?
Well, thank you, my dear. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure talking about mental health. I always say that mental health is who we are,
Mhm.
right? Who we are is mental health. Our mental health defines who we are, regardless of our uh how we describe ourselves. Mental health is our foundation.
Mhm.
Um, and if we don't take care of our mental health, we don't take care of ourselves.
Mhm.
I'm no expert here, but when it comes to our mental health and when it comes to Africans in general, we tend to look at it from a different lens, and we tend to look at it, we tend to define it from a different angle. We don't look at it as something of, and we don't give it that significance that every other ethnicity gives it. Mental health is important. It's important to everyone, every human being. Our
Mhm.
DNA, our DNA is our mental health. And
Mhm.
if you go back generations, if you go back generation in our African culture, especially our African men, our African ancestors, our African forefathers, they were raised to be the men. They were
Mhm.
raised to be the head of the family. They grew up knowing that's all they needed to do, to raise, take care, and lead the family, and nothing
Mhm.
else.
Mhm.
You have these men growing up and grooming their sons to be the men that they need to be to lead their families. And there's nothing else that matters to them. Nothing else should take precedent over that. And that is the mentality that our forefathers were raised with. And it goes from generation to generation.
Mhm.
And when that happens, it continues. And when it continues, each generation takes over it and continue with it. It's like, handing the baton to the next generation. And then when someone comes in and tries to talk or bring that awareness,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes it. What are you talking about? There's no such thing as mental health.
Mm-hmm.
This is how it's supposed to be. This is
Mm-hmm.
who we are. This is our culture. So anything other than that is a taboo. Anything other than what we know or what my grandfather told me or his grandfather, my great 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 grandfather, is a taboo. So it's not something that we are open to. It's not something that we talk about.
Yeah, that's true. Growing up, you really didn't hear people talk about depression or anxiety, and even coming up to an African parent to say, I'm depressed. They're like, what are you depressed? What do you mean? What is depression? You're lazy. You need to go outside and play. You need to do this. They're not really looking at depression or mental health disorders as a disorder. And you have people growing up and they're taught to be kind of like more stoic, right?
Yeah.
You cannot show emotions. So you're a man, you need to man up. What do you mean? What is depression? You don't want to say that. But these conversations just have to remind us that healing begins with honesty and vulnerability. You know, our African brothers don't have to be silent. You can talk to someone if there's something that's going on. The pain really matters, and healing is not only possible, it is necessary. Mm. We're actually encouraging people to speak up because the statistics show that men are more prone to suicide more than women. And it's a
Mhm.
lot of men who have been committing suicide because it's like they don't have an outlet. There's no outlet for them to really express how they feel, um, express their emotions, because it comes off as weakness.
Yeah. And Martha, also remember that it's not, I'm going to be careful using the word dismiss
Mhm.
because it's a matter, I'll use the word ignorant
That's true.
than dismiss because they are not dismissing it. They are not aware of it. Their awareness brings dismissal. When we are not aware of something, we cannot dismiss it because we're not aware of it. We dismiss something that we are aware of, right? So if the ignorant aspect of it
Mhm.
is what is bringing us down, is what is propelling the mental health taboo, the
Mhm.
ignorance of it. Our great 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 grandfathers or ancestors,
Mhm.
they lived a primitive life. They had no idea what
Mhm.
was happening or manifesting in them. All they
Mhm.
just did was copy what they saw their parents do or their fathers do. And it went from generation to generation. So the ignorance in it just kept manifesting and growing from one generation to generation. Now we have that awareness. So now, when we dismiss with that awareness, when we dismiss what we now know, then we can take a step back and say, wait a minute here. With the awareness, why are we dismissing this? Looking at the facts, looking at the effects, looking at what is happening to us, then we can rightly say that we are dismissive of the mental issues that we have because we are aware of the effects that is happening in us or how it's manifesting in us. Our ancestors weren't aware of it. They didn't know better. They didn't have the knowledge. They were just going with what they saw or what they were being told to do. How they were just copying what they saw their fathers, their grandfathers, their uncles, even the women. Remember, it's not only the men, the women as well went through this harsh lifestyle as well, and they embrace it. because there was no other way. They know they had no other option but to
So it's like
embrace.
they were fighting for survival, right?
It was
Just to
survival of the
survive.
fittest.
Right. So
Exactly. It was
they're like,
survival of the fittest. They
yeah,
were
so it's
programmed. They were
right.
programmed to survive that way. They had no
Mhm.
other option but to do
Mhm.
it that way. So the men were trained that you hunt, you farm, you fish, you do whatever it takes to put food on the table for your family, regardless of what is happening to you. Your leg might be bleeding, you might be be attacked by an animal in the forest or in the farm. You got to get up and stick going. Just keep going as long as your family has food on the table. And the
Mhm. Yeah,
women were trained that regardless, you might be having a migraine headache, get out of that bed and you got to put that pot on the fire and cook food and make dinner for your husband and take care of your kids. So
exactly.
so they were
Exactly.
trained, their neural system were programmed to work that way. So
Yeah.
they had
So
no
so long as
choice.
they're looking at it like so long as you have food, why would you be depressed, right? So if you were to go up and tell your mother, you're depressed, have you eaten? Go,
You
go
exactly.
eat. So food, which was just that's just a basic human need, it becomes, the norm. Like, okay, once you have food, then you should have life. Life should not be hard for you. And then
Hmm.
that even goes into another question because the upbringing, which kind of made men feel like they had to survive, they had to provide. Do you think that there are pressures now that men are still going through, because the pressure of having to provide, the pressure of having to be the protector, the pressure of having to, carry all this load, taking care of your family. Do you think that's affecting our men's mental health and maybe affect the way they do communicate right now?
100%. 100%. Remember that the men grew up in the environment, in the culture. Now, I want to be be specific. I'm not talking about the first generation, our first generation kids who are born in this part of the world, in the Western world. I'm talking about the immigrant African men and those who are back in Africa and in third world countries. Is that what you're referring to? Your question is referring to that, right?
Right.
Of course, because when we grow up in our communities, in our culture back home and in Africa, you're being raised as an African man or as an immigrant man to take care of your family, to raise your family. Your job is to raise your family, nothing else. Nothing else. You're not being raised to take care of yourself. I
Yeah.
was having a conversation with a man, a grown man. This is an African man, a grown man. All he knew, or all he had known until in his mid 40s was to work hard and take care of his family.
Family.
That's all
Mhm.
he knew.
Yeah.
That's all he was ingrained. That's all he knew.
Yeah. And
And,
that's still true. That's
and
still
he
true
said to
nowadays.
me, when I asked him, I said, how about you? He took a deep breath and he looked at me and he said, I don't know how to take care of me. I've never thought about taking care of me. And that was an aha moment for him when I asked him that question, that how about you? After he gave me a laundry list of the things that he's doing for others.
Mm.
Not to say that taking care of others is a bad thing or he shouldn't do, but he has grown up from the time he was this tall, knowing that he has to take care of everyone else. That was his responsibility as a man. He has to take care of everyone else. He has to take care of his family. He has to take care of this. He has to take care of that. Except for him. No one told him that you got to take care of you. So
Yeah.
when these men grow, or when these kids, because they start hearing that when they are kids, when these kids grow up with that understanding, with that mentality, they grow up with that in their neural system. Is programmed to think that way,
Mhm.
and they live their lives thinking that way. The last person they are thinking about is themselves. And
Yeah.
that mental health, when it's not being taken care of, it affects them psychologically, emotionally, socially, physically, because you start hearing somebody saying that my body hurts, my back aches, my knees are hurting me, my body is aching me. It affects you in every part of your body without your knowing.
Yeah, that is
That
so true.
is mental health.
Yes, that is true. Because I think we've said it in this episode before, or some of the previous episodes, that your mental health affects your physical well-being. And most people feel like when you're going through something mentally, that's something that you can just kind of just get over it, or but they really don't understand how it really affects them physically. Most of our men even just struggle to even take care of their physical health. How
Oh,
about
yeah.
mental health? Because there's been talks. I actually was talking to one of our brothers that I tried to get to come on the show, when he was just sharing his struggles, saying that he's been trying to get the men to even go get checked out
Yeah.
because,
Oh, yeah.
as we all know, cancer is rampant right now. It's killing a lot of people. And if you don't get checked out, you're not going to know that you have cancer. So he's been really trying and sharing his struggles as well. But then how about mental? Because even if it's something physical, they can't do it when it's mentally, they're just kind of brushing it off. But it's affecting our communities. I mean,
Tremendously.
lately, I'm telling you, lately, so many of us are struggling. Our relationships are struggling.
Yeah.
And people are not really talking about it. They're just going about it, on their own. They're not trying to seek therapy because they say, oh, why should I go pay somebody to just talk to me? But there is strength in that.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
strength because you talk to someone so you can get a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You may have a way of looking at things, but when you don't get the perspective of somebody else, then you're only going to be acting as much as you know how.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always room for improvement.
Always.
Knowledge is power, and if you don't know, just like you were saying, it's ignorance, right? If you cannot identify a problem, then you cannot fix it. So you always have to be able to seek more information. That way, you can find out how can you change your way of thinking, because there's so much like trauma that we went through growing up with learned behaviors from our
Oh, yeah.
ancestors, that
Yes.
these things are changing.
Yeah.
And if you're not changing with it, you're going to be stuck.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be stuck. So we have to be able to change as time goes on. And as you were talking about men having to be the sole provider, they know they have to take care of things, especially back home, that most men were brought up like that. So when we even come here, like to the diaspora, it's even getting worse in the diaspora because it's a different culture here in the diaspora. You don't have
Yeah.
to do it alone. You have
Yeah.
a partner who also works and you support. But if you're still coming with that mentality of thinking that you have to do it all, and then you're putting all this pressure on you and
Mm.
not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of somebody else if you can't take care of yourself.
No, you
You
cannot. You
cannot,
cannot.
yeah, you
And
cannot pour from an empty cup. So
no.
you have to make sure that your cup is full before you
Mm-hmm.
can pour. And when you go to pour, you don't pour it all. You pour and you leave some for you. Because when you
You,
get thirsty, you're gonna need that drink.
you could, yeah, absolutely. You're gonna, and you cannot do all alone.
Right. Right.
right? You cannot do all alone. You cannot, especially if you're privileged to have some, like you mentioned, to have a partner. It's okay to say, you know what, let's see how we can work together, to make things easier. I cannot do this alone. Let's see how we can work together to make things easier. I'm a man, yeah, but it doesn't mean that
Shoulder it all.
I'm gonna squeeze every ounce of blood out of my system to prove that I'm a man, to prove that I want to take care of the entire family. No, you don't need to do that. You don't have to do that. You got to take care of you. You need to be okay. You need to be present for the loved ones that you have around you. You don't
Yeah,
need to prove anything. I think that's another thing too.
that's so
You
true.
don't need to prove anything to
Mhm.
be acknowledged. You don't need to prove anything to receive that affirmation. You don't need to prove anything to receive that respect. You don't need to prove anything to be seen. You don't need to
Mhm.
prove anything to be somebody. You are somebody already. Being alive, you are somebody. You don't need to prove anything to be competitive. You are already competitive being alive today.
Uh,
You don't need to prove anything to be a man. You are already a man. God created you. So
uh,
we just need to let go and
you're
just
right. You're
be.
right about that. Right. People
We
need to
just need
learn
to
how to.
let go and just be.
Mhm.
We don't need to prove to say, okay, I'm gonna make sure that I come home with this amount of money and prove to this and that. No, take
Mhm.
care of you.
Yeah.
Take care of you,
Right.
and,
And
and you'll be good.
yeah. I think that's one big thing too, Auntie. Like you said, they don't need to prove. you know,
No,
a
no.
lot of men are really trying to prove themselves. Like it's a pressure, maybe like social stigma or um, identity loss, or even if it's just systemic racism. They're always fighting all of these things to kind of prove themselves. And that will manifest itself in like anger. You're angry, you become violent, you become your way of responding to things, you don't really take time to think things through, because there's just so much pressure. So a lot of that
Mhm.
pressure, you have to have some kind of outlet, and
Yeah.
let it be a healthy outlet too, because sometimes too we go talk to people who also just have that same mentality, and then it's like they still just add to the toxicity. So that's why we say people need to seek help from
Yeah.
professionals,
Mm-hmm.
or at least someone that that they have had some kind of experience that has changed their mindset. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot be stuck in your ways, because you hear too many African men say, I'm an African man. I don't do that. I don't do this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, as an African man, that doesn't mean that you cannot show emotions. That doesn't mean that you cannot love fully. That doesn't mean that you cannot be affectionate, because you probably didn't see these things growing up. So you can learn these things. And there's no such thing as I'm an African man. I can't.
Yeah, I've heard quite a bit of those statements. Unresolved anger leads to depression.
Oh yeah.
Unresolved anger leads to depression. And I've heard a lot of some of those statements that you just referred to, Martha, where I've heard, people say, I'm not gonna um allow someone to tell me how to live my life, referring to, a professional. And I beg to differ. Someone is not telling you how to live your life. When you seek professional help or professional guidance, you're talking to someone who is a trained professional, someone who is listening with an objective ear,
Mhm.
and who is coming to you from a place of open-mindedness, who has nothing to gain or lose from whatever situation you're bringing to them.
Mhm.
And they're bouncing off whatever information you bring to them. That is what happens in a setting when you go to seek guidance or support from a professional.
Yeah, that's true.
So the notion of I'm an African man, no one is going to tell me how to live my life is just ridiculous because no one is telling you how to live your life.
Mhm.
We live in a society and a culture that is totally different from the one that we were born and raised in. So if we want to live in the society and culture that we currently live in and adapt with the way the life in this community, in this culture and society in, we're going to have to hunker down some of those behaviors and we're going to let go of some of those cultural norms that we grew up abiding to.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And, things have evolved. There are a lot of practitioners out there who are now culturally sensitive. I
Oh,
see,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yes.
I see a lot of patients like I'm mainly medication management, which, I would diagnose and treat mental health disorders. But when I see immigrants come in, I try to talk to them. I just try to give them the techniques that I, know has helped or that has proven to help. And some people look at it like, okay, where do I start to even do this? When you even talk to someone about deep breathing exercises, and oh, that's not something I've ever thought about. But not even just thinking that when you take a moment to just stop and think about something and observe it, you'll be able to proceed mindfully. But we just never do that. It's almost like it's done this automatic ways of responding that once we're faced with adversity, we just have these ways of responding that it doesn't help our situation, makes it worse. So
Right.
when you speak to someone, it's learning those techniques that can help you to manage your behavior. There's no one that's perfect. You can't just say, oh, I know what I'm doing. Why should I go see someone, pay someone to listen to them talk? There are even like venues because now people are creating venues where men can come talk,
Mm-hmm.
and
Safe
hopefully, Auntie,
spaces.
exactly. Hopefully, Auntie, that's something that we can work on because I was also talking to one of our brothers in the community. I said this would be something good that you could have going on every month. Because us women, we are women, right? We can talk about what we have experienced with men, but we don't know because we are not men. It would be good for men to kind of tell us exactly what's going on with them, how they feel, because feelings is not something that you can dispute with. If someone feels a certain way, we have to respect their feelings and acknowledge their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But then some of these feelings come from like cognitive distortions that until you learn how to unlearn those distorted beliefs, you will always think in that distorted way. And then your responses are also going to be distorted. But when you learn how to challenge these distortions, then you start seeing life in a different point of view. You start saying, oh, you know what? I've been thinking that I've been doing this thing, I've been right all along, but I really wasn't. Let me find a different way of looking at it. Because
Open-mindedness.
exactly, so we have to be minded for things to get better for us, for our mental health to get better. And our community is really suffering. It really is because it's not a lot of research out there that has to really do has to deal with mental health when it comes to the African community. So that's why we really want this to continue. Um, I've seen like African Americans, they're stepping up. When it comes to Caucasians, they've been doing this. A lot of Western cultures, they've been doing this, and but the Black community is the one that has really suffered a lot. But Auntie, I want to ask you: have you had any experience or come across maybe someone who realized that they needed mental health support but felt conflicted, or even behaviors? Because it's hard for you to even hear of an African who was diagnosed with maybe bipolar disorder or schizophrenia because they don't really seek help. People have these behaviors and you're just like, oh my God, he's just crazy, or
Yeah.
they'll even call you bipolar without a diagnosis. Um, so I don't know if you've had any experiences when it comes to that, and if people are really seeking help that they needed, or maybe they felt conflicted.
When it comes to mental health in particular, like you talk about bipolar and or whatnot,
Schizophrenia.
I don't know schizophrenia. I don't know anyone in particular that has opened up with that. However, I know of a few that have been in situations where they have been, because another thing too, when it comes to mental health, abuse is part of mental health, right?
Oh yeah, that's
Emotional,
huge.
physical, and it goes back to the whole African men taboo thing, like being macho, right?
Mhm.
Our brothers, our fathers, our uncles are being groomed to be manly, manly, manly. So even when they find themselves, because sometimes when we talk about abuse, we think about female, the woman, the girl child. We don't think about the boy child. We don't think about the men.
Mhm.
They get into abusive situations too. And we don't talk about it, or they don't talk about it
Oh
because
yeah.
they are scared not to be seen as weaklings, right? Or they don't report it, especially the African men. I remember when I was growing up, we had this neighbor, and this man was being beaten by the wife.
Mhm.
I mean, talking about a grown man with kids. This man was being beaten in the house by the wife. We had no idea. This man was a military man. He was in the military. And his wife was beating this man in the house, and we had no idea. But you see the man next in the morning, he's going to work, he's coming back, he's walking on the street, he's fine. But this man was being physically and emotionally being abused in the house for years. Until I think it was his daughter who slipped up one day and made a statement in the neighborhood, and that's how we found out. But this is a military guy, right? And you see him there in his uniform. You least expect that from somebody like that. And only God bless him. I don't even want to imagine the shame that he must have been experiencing in the house.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that, because really in our African community, how many times do you hear a man come out to say that he's been physically abused? How
We
many
have
times do you hear
it
a man come out and talk about, let's just say, abuse in general, right?
in
Because,
general.
yeah,
It's
because
happening every day.
every day, and it's not only women who get sexually abused.
Oh my
I have
goodness.
had men who have told me
Me?
things that I'm like, do you know that is abuse?
Hmm.
Because you know how our African culture, we have, for the most part, we have a lot of family members in the house.
Oh yeah.
And these men grow up in a family where you have women. And for the most part, you could have like women or family members who come to the house and they abuse them
Hmm.
because they can have them do like sexual acts on them. But
Hmm.
then because you're a man, you don't even know how to even tell somebody that this woman did that to you. I had a friend who was from Kenya, and he this guy told me like he literally could not stop masturbating. He
Yeah.
would just masturbate. Like, I'm like, but what is wrong? Like, what? He's like, well, he started doing this because he was really, I think he was like 5, and his
Can
aunt,
you imagine
yeah,
that?
his aunt had sexually abused him. So it's like the aunt was in the house and will constantly have him do stuff with her. And he just thought that that was fine. And he grew up to really love this aunt and really cared for her so much because
They
he
groom
just thought,
you.
yeah,
They
yeah,
groom the young boy.
yeah, he just thought that that was love. And it's not until when he grew up that he was like, oh, so this is not something that's normal that
Mm-hmm.
I have to be doing. So as an adult, he still could not control himself because he had been so used to that. So it's a lot of abuse that happens too. It's just that men are not vocal like women because
No, they're not.
women can come out and say these are the things that happen, but then the men don't. But if they don't learn how to speak, because now when you don't talk and you don't heal from this trauma, then it's affecting your life. It's affecting your relationship. It's affecting the people that you
Yeah.
come across in your life. So there's no need to be silent, you know. And most men will think that having to talk about this thing is a weakness. But no, coming from a woman's point of view, I
It's
think
not.
most women admire that. They admire men who come out and they're able to be vulnerable. So vulnerability is not weakness at all. It's
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
I know a similar story to the one you just shared of someone. It was a family member as well, a cousin, living with them in the same house during holidays, summer holidays. You know how holidays family members would come to the house and all whatnot, and that cousin was busy molesting them in the same house, and
Yeah.
they thought it was normal.
Hmm.
And they couldn't even tell their father, the young boy couldn't even, at that time he was a boy, couldn't even tell the father because he thought this is an older cousin and this was normal. But
Hmm.
then he realizes that the cousin was doing it only to him and something just wasn't right. But this
Hmm.
boy was molested, sexually molested. So these are conversations. And then is still affecting this boy who is now a grown man in his mid
Hmm.
50s
Hmm.
today.
That's so true. That's
So
so true.
a lot of our African brothers, a
Yeah.
lot of them have been physically abused, mentally abused, psychologically abused, emotionally abused, and all that is playing in their mental health. And we need to talk about it. They need to talk about it. They need to know that it's okay to talk about it. They need to know that it's okay to say, I'm not feeling okay. I feel
Mhm.
depressed because of all these emotions that have pent up in my stomach. They're making me sick. They're making me depressed. And I need to talk to someone about it. I need a safe space. I need to talk to someone who can guide me, who can listen to me and not judge me. And it's
Exactly.
okay for me to do so because what? I'm a human being.
Right. So with that, we're gonna come to the last part of the segment. So what are some practical first steps that African men can take towards improving their mental health? What would you recommend?
I think in our conversation we touch on that
Yeah,
already.
we have touched some of it. So I think I mean, and
Yeah,
I can go first, or if you want, you can, but we'll
yeah,
just kind of like take it back.
I think that we touch on some of it. The first step is to understand that they are not alone.
Hmm.
Whatever whatever they're carrying with them, they are not alone. There are so many other African men out there. And men in general, we shouldn't forget, men in general usually don't talk about their mental health, in particular, African men. Men
Hmm.
in general, in particular, African men. So one of the first step I would say is to know that they are not alone, that
Hmm.
whatever their challenges are or whatever they are carrying with them, they are not alone. Two, talk to someone about it. Don't talk to someone who is going to say, oh man, I understand. I get it. It happened to me. Because when someone gives you that answer, they're telling you that it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to someone who will say, okay, let me hear more.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who is prepared to listen
Mm-hmm.
and go deeper
Mm-hmm.
to see how they can help you unravel what
Mm-hmm.
is still sitting there that is affecting you in ways that you're not aware of. And
Yeah.
then start the healing process.
Process. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I think in our African community too, there's a lot of unhealed trauma. You
Mhm.
know, most of us are walking around with trauma, carrying it on our back, which is like a weight that is just there. And once you don't process that and heal, then you are stuck.
Mhm.
You are stuck and you only have these distorted ways of dealing with the day-to-day stresses that happen to you on a daily basis. So healing is something that you start, which is a journey. So you have to start processing this trauma, like really thinking about the things that happened to you. Like, let me talk to someone. And also, like creating safe spaces. I know that sometimes men really don't want to. Some people are not good with their one-on-one. You know, they can create spaces which are safe for them to be able to talk about these issues that's going on, to say, man, this is what's going on. And I face this issue. What kind of solutions are out there that can help? There are resources. You know, you could go online now. There's so many resources out there. Some people even don't know how to seek help because I had someone ask me, how do you even get mental health services? So they don't even know. You know,
Yeah.
the insurance covers because mental health can be very expensive. You can
Yes.
find some therapists, some people, if you don't have insurance, there are some therapists that will do care based on finances. So they could
Mhm.
look at your finances. If you're not working, they would maybe do like what we call what is it called? I can't remember the name now, but it's like a scale that goes based on your income. But most insurances cover mental health. People don't know this. They only think
Yes.
that your insurance is for physical health. Mental health is one of the services that's covered on a monthly basis. You can see someone on a monthly basis and they will pay. You may just have to pay like a little copay.
Mhm.
Um,
Which is still the same as your PCP will take your copay as well. So
Exactly. So there is help out there. And you know, some people don't want diagnosis because I see this and I hear this every day because I'll have an African say, hey, can you prescribe this medication for me? But I just don't want a diagnosis. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. If you're going to need medications, we first of all even have to have an initial evaluation to see if you even have a diagnosis before we even talk medications.
mhm.
Um, and I think there's some kind of education surrounding it because people think that when you have a diagnosis, the whole world knows that you're diagnosed with this. They can
No,
pull your records and know that. No, I
no.
mean, for anyone to release your records, there has to be a signed consent. You know,
Yeah.
and when you talk, and that's why I even tell people talk to a professional because as a professional, you
HIPAA.
have standards that you have to meet. You know, the HIPAA, you cannot release anybody's information without their consent. So I'll say, don't deny yourself help. If you need help, seek help. The help is out there, and nobody has to know. And even if some people knew that you were seeking therapy, the goal is for you to enhance yourself, is to enhance your well-being. And I say this again, your mental health will affect your physical well-being because if you're not mentally healthy, and then you start looking old, you start looking cranky, you start looking, sick. So, I mean, to every African man that's watching this, we hear you, we see you, because for the most part, too, men feel like they're not heard, they're not seen. We do see you.
Yes.
And you're not alone. You don't have to suffer in silence. Mental health is not a Western concept. It's not, because people always
No,
say, "Oh, now y'all are
no,
westernized. You want to
no.
talk about mental health?" It is actually a human right.
It
you
is.
know, it's your
It,
life, is your peace, is your healing, and your healing matters. We all deserve happiness. So whatever it is, if like the things that's bothering you, sometimes, yeah, prayers work. You can pray, but then there has to be action behind prayers, because that's another thing that's in our community now, that people just say, "Oh, just pray about it, just pray." You
you
cannot
can do
just
both. Do both.
Yes, you have to do both.
Pray and get
Yes,
the treatment
and
for
get
it.
it. Yes, there's a place for everything,
Everything.
but when you are praying, you have to have action, because, like I said again, this we have a lot. Our community is prayer, prayer, prayer. People are starting to practice religion. They're not practicing Christianity. You cannot be preaching things that you cannot practice yourself. So you have to be able to practice. And, oh, yes, nobody is perfect. We're not saying anybody is, but for the most part, you have to have the action behind it, because you need to meet God halfway. God is like, "My child, give me something to work with now. How you coming over here every day? You ask that, okay, give me life, give me patience. But then you walk, as soon as you walk out the door, somebody says something, you snap.
Yeah.
So what happened to the prayers? So you have to, first of all, learn and be able to ground yourself to say, okay, as I'm a child of God, I cannot be acting in ungodly ways. So thank you so much for joining today, Auntie. Are there any closing remarks that you would like to give, so we can close this out and meet up in the next episode?
The only thing that I would like to add, I mean, I think we pretty much touched every aspect of it, is that um, the understanding that at the end of the day, no one is perfect. At the end of the day, we're all going to deal with mental health in one way or the other. We just need to come to that realization that we are not alone with the
Mhm.
challenges that we face in life. There's
Mhm.
help out there. Mental health is a human illness. It has no color. It has no religion. It has no race. It has no language. It has no boundaries. It affects every single one of us.
Right.
And when we get faced with those challenges, there's help. So let's reach out for help and let's help one another. Let's help one another when we see our brother or our sister in need of help, because we all need one another. So,
Yes, we do.
our African brothers, you're not supermen,
Mhm.
you're human beings. Let's get the help that we all need.
Thank you for that, Auntie. And to our viewers, please like and share this video to reach a brother who needs to hear this.
Yeah.
You can subscribe for more culturally grounded mental health content, and also follow us on YouTube, and we're on
Yeah.
social media, TikTok, and we will put the link below. Auntie is a coach. She knows her thing. If you need some kind of coaching, you could always reach out to Auntie. And hey, if you're able to reach out to me, you can reach out to me. But we're looking forward to continuing this conversation, so
We
we
will.
can try to touch, one African at a time. Thank
Yes.
you, and until next time. Bye.